I was a bit bigger then, maybe 7 or 8, old enough to venture a little further into the woods with Redpaw. We had started our walk that morning from the glade, intending to explore a new path Papa had mentioned, one that led deeper into the forest than I'd ever gone before. This day, we were exploring a part of the forest path I hadn't been down before, a winding track that led further and further away from the glade, our usual clearing and deeper into the trees, where the sunlight was thinner and the air smelled cooler, damper. Redpaw trotted ahead, nose to the ground, tail wagging, as always eager to explore. But as we rounded a bend in the path, his tail stilled and a low growl rumbled in his chest, a sound I knew even then meant, "Pay attention, Lidda. Something's different." He nudged my hand with his nose, pulling me back a step, his gaze fixed on something just off the path, deeper in the shadowed undergrowth. I followed his gaze, my own curiosity instantly piqued. And there they were, mushrooms. But not like any mushrooms I'd ever seen before in our woods. These weren't the sturdy brown toadstools or the delicate white fungi Mama sometimes gathered for her stews. These were luminous. They grew in a cluster at the base of an old moss-covered log, and their caps glowed with a soft inner light, like captured moonlight. They were colors I'd never seen on a mushroom before. One was a shimmering violet, another a soft pearlescent pink, and a third pulsed with a gentle, almost electric blue. They looked like jewels scattered on the forest floor, utterly beautiful and utterly strange. I took a step closer, drawn in by their otherworldly glow. "Wow," I breathed, forgetting Redpaw and his growling completely. "Look, Redpaw, look at these." But Redpaw wasn't looking with wonder. His growl deepened, and he stepped in front of me, blocking my path to the glowing mushrooms. He whined softly, then nudged my leg again, harder this time, pushing me back, his eyes darting between me and the mushrooms. His message clear: stay away. But I was 7 and curious, and the mushrooms were just so beautiful. And besides, what could a mushroom do? Redpaw was being silly, I thought, overprotective, as usual. "It's just a mushroom, Redpaw," I said, trying to reassure him, and maybe myself a little. "See? It's pretty." And before I could think any further, before I could really register Redpaw's frantic nudging and low, rumbling protest, I reached out and touched it, the violet one. Its cap was smooth and cool, like polished glass, and the moment my fingertip brushed against it, a strange sensation shot up my arm. Not pain, not really, more like tingling. A fizzing, buzzing feeling that spread from my fingertip up my arm and into my chest, making my heart beat a little faster. The air around me seemed to shimmer, and the colors of the forest, the greens of the leaves, the browns of the bark, suddenly seemed too bright, almost vibrating. A faint, high-pitched ringing started in my ears, and for a dizzying moment, the ground seemed to tilt beneath my feet. But more than that, something else happened. It was like the forest itself dimmed around me, the sounds fading, the smells receding. Everything narrowed, funneling down to the glowing mushroom, pulling my focus, drawing me in. It wasn't just dizziness. It was like my mind was being gently, insistently drawn away, somewhere else. I swayed, suddenly feeling not quite right, like I was a little bit floaty, and the world was just a little bit off-key, and like, if I wasn't careful, I might just drift away completely. Redpaw whined again, a worried, higher-pitched sound this time, and nudged my hand, licking at my fingers. The tingling started to fade, the color softened back to normal. The ringing in my ears lessened, and the ground steadied beneath me. The floaty feeling receded, leaving me feeling just a little bit silly and a little bit shaky, and strangely disoriented, like I'd woken up from a very short, very odd dream. Just then, I heard Papa's voice calling my name, closer than I expected. "Lidda? Redpaw? You two wandered off again?" He emerged from the trees, his brow furrowed with concern, then relaxed slightly as he saw us, standing by the glowing mushrooms. He approached slowly, his gaze shifting from me to the strange fungi, then back to me, his eyes searching mine. "What have we here, little sprout? And what were you touching?" I pointed at the violet mushroom, feeling a little sheepish now, remembering Redpaw's warnings. These glowy mushrooms, Papa. They're so pretty. I just wanted to see." Papa knelt down beside me, his presence grounding and solid, and gently examined the mushrooms, not touching them himself, just observing them closely. He nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. He murmured, his voice low. "Fey caps these are. Pretty, yes, and interesting." He glanced at Redpaw, then back at me, a knowing look in his eyes. "Redpaw was warning you, wasn't he?" I nodded, looking down at my feet, feeling a flush creep up my cheeks. "Yes, but I didn't listen." Papa smiled, a gentle, understanding smile, not a scolding one. He placed a hand on my shoulder, warm and reassuring. "The forest," he said quietly. His voice, like the rustling leaves themselves, is full of wonders, Lidda flower. Beautiful things, strange things, things that can teach us. But it is also wild, and holds its own secrets, and its own little magics, some bright and harmless, some not so much." He gestured to the glowing mushrooms with his chin. "These Fey caps, they are beautiful to look at, and they hold a little bit of Feywild magic, just enough to make them glow, and tickle your senses a bit if you touch them. But they are also a little bit tricky. A light touch, like yours, just gives a tingle and a dizzy spell. But if you were to hold on to one, linger too long, well, Fey things can be alluring, Lidda. You could find yourself drawn in, caught in a little Fey trance, your mind wandering, and your body would be here, still and quiet and vulnerable. Vulnerable to the real dangers of the forest, the ones that aren't just pretty lights and funny feelings." He looked at Redpaw, and then back at me, his eyes full of gentle wisdom. "Redpaw knows these things," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Animals often do. They sense the whispers of the forest in ways we sometimes forget how to. When Redpaw warns you, Lidda, it is wise to listen. The forest speaks in many voices, little sprout. Sometimes it speaks through the bark of trees, sometimes through the rush of the stream, sometimes through the growl of a loyal friend. And sometimes," he smiled again, a twinkle in his eye, "sometimes it speaks through a little tingle in your fingers and a funny floaty feeling when you don't listen to the other voices first." He stood up, pulling me gently to my feet. "Come," he said, his hand resting lightly on my back. "Let's leave these pretty glow caps to their secrets. And next time Redpaw has something to say, perhaps we'll listen a little closer, I nodded, feeling a mix of sheepishness and a strange, bubbling sense of wonder, and just a tiny shiver of unease at the thought of being vulnerable to the real dangers of the forest. I glanced back at the glowing mushrooms, still pulsing softly in the shadows, now with a new kind of respect and a new understanding. The forest was beautiful, yes, and magical, just like Papa always said. But it was also something to be listened to, not just looked at, and not just touched without thinking. And sometimes, the best lessons came not from touching the pretty glow, but from listening to the quiet growl of a friend who knew the woods better than I did. And maybe, just maybe, sometimes, my impulsive fingers needed to learn to listen to my ears and my heart a little bit more, and to trust the quiet wisdom of a furry red friend who always knew best.